You know, I said I was done discussing Tunnelgate until something new happened. That was my statement, and something new happened. We're here, and it has to be addressed. I'm excited for a sort of a new wrinkle on this. It's been sort of the same story again and again and again. If we are going to talk about it, I'm happy to have something new to talk about. Obviously, Justin Spiro from Off the Curb. This is going to be interesting. So today, very, very recently, attorney David Diamond released a statement alleging that a Michigan player started that infamous incident in the tunnel at Michigan Stadium. So this was out there as a Twitter rumor that there was a version of the story going on. I don't know. No one knew what to make of it. There's been a lot of false rumors. I kind of just let it lie. Now there's an actual statement out from an attorney who has taken on a client involved in this. So I wanted to grab just a couple samples of the statement, and then we'll go from there. So this reads in part, quote, an investigation that yields that a Michigan football player engaged with Spartan athletes with his helmet and swinging a punch. We have learned that the University of Michigan player started the altercation. Eyewitnesses have described it as charging with his helmet and throwing a punch. That's David Diamond. And we'll finish here. Quote, this case does not warrant a criminal filing. Speaking with the detective investigating the case, I am comforted by his impartiality. End quote from David Diamond. So I was going to have a reaction to this without David Diamond or without anybody, just you and I talking in the comfort of our homes. But I figured, let's call David Diamond, see if he'll join us. And he has. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Off the Curb. David Diamond, appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Justin. My pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
I know you are in high demand. I talked to you briefly earlier. You said you had some interesting phone calls, as I can imagine that probably happened. So from the top, let's get it out of the way. You're a Michigan State alum. That's going to be, I mean, you said it in the statement. There's no breaking news there. And
there's no breaking news. I am a Michigan State undergraduate alum.
Yep. And you're presumably to some degree a fan, or at least of the institution, if not an active fan of its sports team. So I think that's important just to get out of the way, so no one's sitting here saying, oh, of course. Like, we all know that. You didn't hide the ball on that thing. So I want to start right from, to me, the most important thing to establish early, if you're willing to go there, is Kari Crump your client in this case?
He is not. No, I know there's been some speculation as to who I represent. My clients actually asked that I keep his identity confidential right now. He's been harassed a little bit. He's gotten some lovely gestures from Ann Arbor himself. But no, I do not have that Michigan State Spartan as my client at this time.
Are you willing to verify that it's at least one of the 7 other players involved in the suspensions?
It's one of the 8. Yes, it's one of the 8. Absolutely.
Well, right. Well, 8 suspended, but we already eliminated 1. So I'm doing a game of clue here.
Lawyers are not good at math. So yes, we're down to 7, and it would be one of the remaining 7. Absolutely.
Okay, gotcha. And then, yeah, we'll respect that from there. See, I honestly thought it was Crump, just because that seems to be the one that would be facing the most serious potential charges here based on the allegations and what appears to be a pretty clear helmet swing. So where are you at with this? Obviously, you've been along for the ride. Your statement comes out today. It talks about evidence that we haven't seen. You have evidence is sort of the implication, because there's no evidence of a Michigan player starting anything. You seem to be in a position that is the case. Like, what do you have there? Kind of what's your position here as we stand?
Well, remember, so when we look at the criminal justice system, evidence comes in many forms. Identification, video, eyewitness testimony, things of that nature. So we've been looking for all of those and putting those all together. And so when we say we have the evidence, we have some statements from people that were there that saw what transpired. The difficulty is everybody wants video. Well, the response I've got today online is, well, where's the video? You're saying that Michigan players started this. Where's the video? Let's remember, when something usually transpires, we don't have the cameras on immediately. It's usually the response to some sort of an altercation, and then everyone turns their cameras on, like happened in the tunnel in this case. So yes, right now we're looking and we've asked to preserve the evidence of any tunnel cameras or security systems that were on. But right now we're dealing with evidence that we've obtained from independent interviews and things of that nature. And I'm convinced at this time that it was the Michigan player that started the altercation. And the language we used wasn't very clear, but I can tell you this: when you put your helmet on and you put your head down and you start to ram a bunch of players, that's starting the altercation from any legal perspective, whether you're in Michigan or in California or any of the other states. That's starting the altercation.
So is the assertion on your guys' part that Jemon Green was, we saw him, say skipping or whatever, kind of bouncing into the tunnel. From that point forward, did like a battering ram with his head down kind of thing? I mean, I'm kind of spitballing. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, well, you have to start with the entirety of the situation. Why were these gentlemen in the tunnel at that time, right? So you're only in there if you're looking for trouble. You're not going in there. You otherwise would be out with your team, running around the field, dancing, doing whatever that the players were doing. Why are you specifically in the tunnel? And U of M's offered changing explanations as to why they were there, but you're there to cause problems. And that's what I'm learning. I'm learning that when the players saw him put his head down a little bit and make the posturing position to kind of go into the assault mode, that's when the response happened. And that's without disclosing too much, because we are going to release our investigation report. But at that time, that's what caused some of the MSU players to respond in their actions. And the questions that will later come up was that a proportionate response to the threat that was posed to the MSU players. And those are the analysis that has to take place with regard to deciding if criminal charges are going to be filed.
We've seen Counselor Tom Mars come out. He has been very vocal throughout this whole process. And I don't know if you saw, he attacked you about an hour or two ago in your statement, and he was taking shots at you. He said that it had to have been a fake statement because no attorney would ever release this statement. And he was calling you, not you a phony. He was saying that it was an imposter. It was not a real attorney's letter. So he's already kind of kicking dirt on you. Has there been any communication from him or from anybody in that ether or a different attorney, any type of communication about
No,
potential?
none
I know
whatsoever.
criminal is separate from civil, but on the civil side, is there any aspect there?
No. So a good civil lawyer in this case, and I don't know anything about Tom Mars. I know he was Walmart's in-house counsel, which is ironic that he's now representing a Wolverine, right? Because most of them are found in most Walmart stores across the state. So I find the irony there. But just furthermore, a good civil lawyer in a case like this would sue everybody involved, would sue the MSU players, would sue U of M as a university, would sue the private security that was attempting to keep that area safe. So it's ironic that Mars is really attacking MSU as an institution, from what I've seen, without really doing his job of going after all the people that are involved. And I don't know how he got on this case. I don't know his involvement. He can attack me all he wants online. The big joke in the courtroom is, how do you tell the difference between a criminal defense attorney and a civil lawyer, right? Civil lawyers have nice, clean manicures and well-cut suits. Criminal defense attorneys, we like to get our hands dirty. We go to trial, and that's where we do our work. So Tom and I are different people. He's got a job to do. That's fine. But so do I. And this case really does not deserve to have any criminal charges filed. It's a football game. That's what happens. If this was on the field, nobody would be talking about this. But suddenly, because it's in a tunnel, Harbaugh's screaming to everybody in the world, let's have criminal charges. Just go out and Google fights on a football field. People swing their helmets. There's been bench brawls where a multitude of parties have been injured. Never have we seen criminal charges filed. So this is much ado about nothing. It really should be. If the investigation is entirely independent, as I believe it to be, then I don't foresee criminal charges being filed.
I do think there is a distinction. I mean, you're saying, like, what's the difference if we're on the football field? No one would care. I agree with you, but I think there is a distinction that once you cross the white line, it's kind of like, mask on, mask off for that case. But the thing that I think, in my opinion, makes this troubling for people, just the video that we've seen, is the volume. It's the fact that and there's different accounts, whether it's 5-on-1 or 8-on-1. People are saying 12-on-1. That's not the case. If it were, I think, even in the tunnel, two guys pushing, shoving, I think it's the sort of ganging up on the sort of mob scene that it portends. Is there any validity to that from the critics of your client and the other, potential future clients in this case, where they were just so outnumbered. Whatever their response was, even if instigated, was perhaps not proportional just by sheer volume of their mass.
Well, there's nothing in the penal code that says that having greater numbers than an individual creates a violation of the law just in that fact. I understand what you're saying, certainly, and I think all parties agree it could have been handled much better. But sometimes in those situations, I've seen the video, I've seen ABC's video, I've watched as many videos as we can find. It's not like he was on the ground with a bunch of people just beating him to a pulp where he couldn't get up. You look, he gets up, he pops up, and he's even kind of doing a little bit of a dance, almost kind of cocky, arrogant, and show no signs of being injured or being hurt. So I think, yes, if it was a group of people surrounding an individual, having him pinned to the ground and just repeatedly, hitting him, punching him, doing whatever, it is a different story. But I don't think it was like that. Yes, the numbers were there, but the attack of the numbers were missing. It wasn't kind of what you typically see with those situations where someone is just getting brutalized by a group of people. That just didn't happen if you really look at the videos.
So your conversations, you mentioned the evidence in different forms, which is absolutely true. Witness statements are evidence. People tend to think evidence means that you have a camera shot or a smoking gun per se. Are your witness statements that you have gathered in your personal investigation going to be consistent with the idea of a Michigan player having started this? Is that something that we see as a pattern in the statements that you've gathered, or is that just one or two people? What kind of scale are we talking here?
That's the conclusion we've reached at this point. We haven't had anyone give any contradictory statements to that conclusion that it was the U of M player that started the incident. So as far as I'm concerned, we're going to keep digging and try to be as objective in our fact finding as possible. Right now, there's zero evidence to conclude anything other than the U of M player started the fight. And you also have to remember what happened afterwards too. We have the Malik Carr incident where one of the relatives, hopped security and came up to Carr. Unfortunately, the Michigan State Police were there to stop it. And of course, back to our friend Tom Marks, he put out a tweet that never happened. We've talked to an individual who was an eyewitness to that incident. So, if Tom's going to keep tweeting out stuff, he should be tweeting out things that are factually correct.
You just stated that you have not received any contradictory statements regarding the account in question that you're putting forward. Have you spoken to somebody outside of the Michigan State bubble as your investigation been contained to Michigan State staffers and players? Have you talked to anybody on the Michigan side, neutral security standing there? Because the natural inclination is going to be, well, if you're interviewing 10 Spartans, they're going to say, oh yeah, the Michigan guy started it. What, you don't have to name names, but does it expand beyond the Michigan State staffer or player sphere so far with whom you've spoken to?
What was most surprising to me was the honesty that was portrayed by people from, we'll call it the Spartan sphere, right? That was what was most compelling to me. And we do a pretty good job of asking difficult questions. So no, we haven't interviewed anyone from the U of M security staff. They're pretty tight-lipped. We've tried to send people out there to do that. Hopefully we'll have a chance to do that. And if criminal charges are filed, obviously we'll be able to talk to everybody that's a recipient witness to the incident. As of now, that sphere inside that tunnel really is going to be a Michigan or a Michigan State person. So you want to say Michigan State people have one perspective. Well, obviously Michigan have any other perspective. I don't think there was anybody in there that's totally, completely impartial. There's either someone on the green side or on that filthy blue side that are going to be giving their opinion to the case.
From a purely strategic standpoint, do you feel disadvantaged that although there are different forms of evidence, video evidence is objectively stronger and more powerful than witness statements? Do you feel disadvantaged that the evidence that you have gathered is from people with potentially a Michigan State bias and it's a statement versus what is an objective video camera from a couple different angles of things going on where it seems to be more implicating of the Michigan State side?
Well, obviously, video evidence is the most powerful in a courtroom. Eyewitness testimony is often something that's broken down once cross-examination takes place. I don't think the video evidence is as clear as everyone makes it out to be because we don't see the whole thing. We only see part two, act two in this play, right? We don't get to see the beginning of it. So while everyone's so certain about what's on the video, just like every other video that you've seen in a courtroom proceeding, the question is always, well, what happened leading up to that? and that's what's missing, and that's what we hope to find. So I don't find the video to be that overwhelming, because we are only getting the final conclusion. We're not getting the first 10 chapters.
Your statement mentioned in part, and we threw it up there earlier, that from your conversations with the investigator, you're confident that he's impartial. What was sort of the general nature of those conversations? Why did you say that in your statement? Why did you leave your conversation with that investigator saying, okay, we're getting a fair shake here?
Well, I think a lot of people are worried because it's a University of Michigan, right? Department of Security and Safety, and people think, well, they're just going to follow what Coach Harbaugh wants. Coach Harbaugh brings in the money. He's the guy that's been screaming to every microphone that's in front of him. But I honestly, in my conversation, got a very fair, objective sense from the officer, well, the detective, the lead detective, that everything would be done according to procedure and that these players would get a fair shake. It's unfortunate and it's tragic what's happening to them right now. Nobody's speaking on their behalf. Nobody's, hearing their side of the story. We're just hearing the ranting and raving from Ann Arbor and really nothing else. Hence, the phone calls and the social media tweets that I've been getting all day.
Yeah, what's that been like? Are you getting, because I know you had mentioned at least one staffer when we spoke earlier today that has been getting some like FUs or things like that. What's that been like today?
I mean, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I do murder cases, I do gang cases, I do high profile cases. I'm used to it. I've got thick skin. But if someone called me a socialist and then hung up the phone, somebody else said, I'm free to make love to myself. Obviously, they use more choice words. Hung up the phone. They were harassing my secretary at the office, saying F off. Go blue, things like that. So, I think that's why people are really upset at the press release, because we're calling out Michigan for the behavior, the arrogance, the high horse behavior, and the mentality. I think that's why their skin is starting to itch so much, because they don't like being called out for, hey, we're the poor victims here. We're the ones that have the moral superiority. But when you really look at it, the behavior coming from that side, not just in the players celebrating, not just in the coaching staff, it's utterly repulsive. And I think they just don't like being called out on that.
I know you can't say his name, but how is your client handling the emotional side of this? I have to think being part of a Twitter firestorm, social media firestorm in 2022 is bad enough to begin with. But when you have somebody of Jim Harbaugh's profile going up there multiple times over the course of multiple days at this point, saying that there should be criminal charges and this is egregious, and basically calling for the effective end of their careers, which is, I think, the default response or, sort of outcome. How is he handling this emotionally, this firestorm? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, it's difficult for him. He wants to get back on the field. He wants to be with his teammates. He wants his reputation intact. I think all of them, I think that they've served their suspension. They should all be back on the field at this point based on knowing what we know. And it's really something that's hurting those that want to go pro, those that want to come back next year and play. I mean, it's do we talk about Juwan Howard anymore? Do we talk about Bush anymore? No one mentions that. Do we talk about Njai with the earlier incident we were talking about? Nobody talks about that stuff because it didn't go anywhere. But now you have Harbaugh raising, it's a great deal of hypocrisy coming from the Michigan athletic department, who did nothing, in my eyes, to any of those players. Whereas here, they want the book thrown at all of these young players.
And they've been non-receptive as a whole to your inquiries regarding the investigation. You said you've put some, attempts to get responses out there. They've been unsuccessful. Has that been your experience thus far?
It has been thus far. And remember, we get greater power once cases get filed because we have subpoena power, deposition power, things of that nature. So right now they're just getting a letter from a Los Angeles lawyer who happened to go to Michigan State saying, hey, let's figure out what really happened. I don't think Michigan wants to really find out what happens. I think they want to play the victim role, continue in the path they're on, and do what they do. That's just the sense I get.
Now, I know we'll wrap here, but there's no guarantees. We understand that in law. I get that. But you're an experienced litigator. What's your feel? You've worked with prosecutors. You've worked on these types of things and things a lot more serious than this. Do you feel that this is going to proceed to criminal charges just based on your conversations? What evidence is out there thus far as we stand right now?
The prosecutor has to ask themselves the simple question: can this case be proven beyond a reasonable doubt? And if not, then the cases shouldn't be filed. I don't think that standard would ever be met on a case like this. So I don't think there's enough for given the totality of the circumstances, forgetting the political climate, I think that the case should not be filed based on everything I see. Does that mean it's going to happen? No. If it doesn't, then I'm coming out to Michigan. I'll stay with you guys for a while. We'll have a 2-week long trial. But based on everything I'm seeing, charges should not be filed in this case.
And last thing, and this will be it, the timeline with the suspensions, the Michigan State coaching staff has said, and they've said publicly, there's no timeline. We're just day by day. Do you have any sense of when they're going to have some resolution? Are these guys just going to be floating out in the ether until the season ends?
Right now, they are. I think that MSU is going to finish their investigation. I think that they're waiting for the criminal investigation to conclude as well, and then make their assessments about what transpired. But let's remember, don't put all eight of these guys in the same pot. If you've seen the video, there's different levels of culpability across the board.
Yeah, very fair. So, David, I appreciate your time. I frankly hope that I don't have to meet you in person, because that would mean there's a big criminal trial and these kids are going to be under the gun. And I hope that doesn't happen. But if it does proceed to that, you're obviously welcome anytime in our studio throughout that process, before, during, or after. And I'd love to have you. I know from talking to you earlier and just from common sense that you have been slammed. You've been inundated with requests and contacts and harassment all day. Sincerely appreciate your time, David. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Be well.
You as well. Thank you. And enjoy that California weather, man. It's starting to get a little cold out here. So that was David Diamond joining us from California, tackling this crazy story. And I did say repeatedly, I was done. I was out on it until something materially changed. And even if you think David is full of crap and there's absolutely no meat on the bone that he's throwing out there, the fact that this response is in the public domain now is a material change in the story, at least from the media perspective, if not in the actual event. So we'll see. I think it was good to get some clarity on the evidence there. I didn't know if there was some secret video we didn't know about. We clarified that there's not, at least not in the possession of David Diamond. But there are multiple statements, according to him, that contradict the Michigan version, the camera version. He's saying that the camera version, quote unquote, is sort of part 2 and we didn't see part 1. I'm fascinated to see where this goes. It's been sort of a bummer story from the beginning, but as someone that went to law school, now I start to click on my law school helmet, and I'm just fascinated by the potential litigation and following it from there. So sincere thanks to David Diamond under the gun for joining us, and for Ben, who is always the man and ready to go. I'm going to be covering this the whole way if anything changes. So as much as we thought we were done with it, we may just be getting started, and we will be covering it the whole way. Appreciate you joining us. Again, thanks to David Diamond from the West Coast. We'll see you off the curb.